I'm excited and nervous as every BAQ to be here. It's so good to see so many people here and so fantastic to be in this really exquisite venue for university. I think that's quite unique to have it here. I'm especially happy to have our prominent guests here at the conference. Mr. K.S. Wong, Secretary for the Environment of the Government of Hong Kong, SAR. And Ms. Li Pei, Deputy Director General for MEP BAQ, and Mr. Timothy Wong, President of the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Thank you very much. As well as our many other prominent speakers in the later part of our opening plenary. And of course I'm very happy to be here together with Bob. You know him as Robert O'Keefe, Vice President of the Health and Vaccine Institute and Chair of the Board of Cleaner Asia. I know him as Bob, as a mentor and a fantastic chair who helps me through thick and thin. And I think it's really good to have him on board and to have him here. I would like to go through a little bit what the status is on air pollution in Asia. All of you will be, now I need to click. Yes, what we see over the last 10 years, or actually over the last decades, now 20 years clearly, is that air pollution has been going the right and the wrong direction. We see dramatic reductions in sulfur emissions over the years. And if you put on the average across Asia, we've got data for more than 300 cities now, you see that sulfur air pollution is well within limits. Similarly from NO2, it's stabilized over the years and it's not a major problem. What is a worrying trend though is that we're seeing that PM10 emissions are on the rise again. There was an initial decline, but now we see that even after the economic crisis of a few years ago, we're seeing that PM10 is going up. And given that particulate matter emissions are the ones that are most associated with health impacts of people, this is the one we should truly be concerned about. What does this mean in practice? It means that people in 7 out of 10 Asian cities in developing countries breathe air that is very harmful to their health. Now obviously air pollution is harmful at any level, even at some of the lower levels, but for these cities people are essentially putting their health every day at risk. And this is a worrying trend. We've seen this number grow, and because of that we would really like to ring the alarm bell that air pollution must be brought high on the policy agenda and political agenda and public agenda over the next years. What we see as reasons is we see more transport. We have every year in Asia, the growth rate of vehicles is 11.5%. So you have cities where the number of vehicles every day is increased by 1,000. Now that's 350,000 a year, so they're massive numbers. Obviously with that comes a higher demand for fuel, close to 10%. The CO2 emissions from transport have risen by 10.1%. And frankly, we don't know exactly how much the emissions have risen for particulate matter because we don't have enough data in Asia to know what technology adoption has been happening for vehicles. And if you compare this to GDP, the very worrying conclusion is that the CO2 from road transport in Asia is growing faster than the economy. And we should be going the other way. We should decouple emissions from GDP, whereby the emissions grow less fast than the economy. Unfortunately, with transport, we see the opposite happen. If you look at energy, very much similar. It's not that the CO2 emissions are rising faster than the economy, but still the emissions are growing as fast. And the main cause of this is, of course, that we still very much rely on coal as a source for our power plants. Even though renewables are starting to increase and say wind and solar energy, it's a small fraction of the total and it's not yet able to make a dent in the emissions from energy. And finally, urbanization. 120,000 people a day, 44 million people a year, 1.1 billion by 2030, in the next 30 years, will be added to our cities in Asia. And because of that, you're having bigger problems with energy and transport, but you also see more people being exposed to air pollution. And thus, I expect that the number of people in Asia more people in Asia will get sick and die because of air pollution, unless we take action now. Now, so what we have decided together with our partners is what we need for 2016, and it's really our strategy for the next 4 years. We need better national ambient air quality standards. And while we commend countries like China and India, for example, who have already moved quite far ahead with standards, we see many countries that are still lagging behind. What we want is that all countries in Asia have PM10 and PM2.5 standards in line with the World Health Organization interim target. So that's below that line that I said where the air pollution gets so very harmful. We need better standards for vehicle emissions, at least Euro 4 across Asia. We need at least 50 ppm sulfur for all fuels around Asia, and we need fuel economy standards. Now obviously this is the minimum. We'd like to get beyond it. But let me show you. In 10 years, this is the PM annual standards. And of course the darker the worse, so it's easy to see, I hope. And what we've seen in 2012 is that the standards have already improved. But what we want is this. This is our target for 2016. PM 2.5, in 2001 nobody had standards. We're now seeing improvement there, and for example China is about to tighten its standards significantly. And then we have here for 2016 what we really would like Asia to have. The importance is that we move beyond the big countries in Asia, that we also look at the small ones. And the reason is that the economies are so interconnected. Vehicles from Korea, I see them driving in Africa. So it's very easy to understand that if something is manufactured in China, those cars will probably be driving the roads of Vietnam. Trucks that start in Thailand go all the way to Guangzhou. Vehicles that drive in Bangladesh might end up in the south of India. These countries are united as a region, and because of that, we need to address this as a region, and countries should help each other out by learning from each other and getting improvements together. So the other thing is, aside from standards, is monitoring and data, and tomorrow we'll be launching a major report called Accessing Asia, with key air pollution and greenhouse gas indicators for transport and energy for 13 countries in Asia, covering essentially 95% of the population, 95% of the GDP, and 95% population and 89% of GDP. What we also need is better air quality monitoring systems. Sometimes, and this is what I find unfair, is sometimes we get asked, what is the worst city air pollution-wise in Asia? And usually it's one that has very good monitoring systems. So it really should be that all cities must monitor the air, and that we don't let cities get away with not monitoring, and because of that, not ending up on a bad air pollution list. The third one is then the policies. We need city clean air plans and reports, and those should ideally combine air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. The co-benefits of addressing them are financially make sense, they make sense from a policy perspective, and the overlays of air quality and climate are just too big to ignore. They need to be addressed together. We need voice shift improved policies for transport. We need to make sure that the walking and cycling and public transport at least is kept at what it is now and should improve. But we're seeing, especially for walking, a decline in the number of people that walk because they're ignored in many of the policies that are in place now. Better programs for in-use vehicles, the national green freight programs, given that freight, although trucks are only about 5 to 10% of the emissions, they can be responsible for up to 60% of the emissions from transport. And finally, we need to have better demonstration of technologies. So one thing we did together with the Asian Development Bank is develop a clean air scorecard for cities that looks at 3 things. What is the air pollution level, and how does it compare to the World Health Organization guidelines? What is the management capacity of a city? Do you have the monitoring in place, the source apportionment? Do you know the impacts of air pollution? Do you have the right institutions? And you have the budget. Without money, there's not much you can do. So that's important too. And finally, policies and actions. What general standards do you have at the national level, and what specific policies and actions are you doing for transport, energy industry, and the various other sources? Now, we've worked with several cities as listed on the right, and we're finding it very effective because it gives the cities a very good starting point, and it allows them to subsequently come up with a more effective clean air plan and to communicate it to their government agencies, stakeholder, and the wider public. But now moving on from air, the last point I want to leave you with is that if we really want to have clean air, and this is why we are also here today, it's about cities. What we're seeing now is that, this is an example from Ho Chi Minh, we need to have low emissions urban development. We need to plan our cities to make sure that we avoid a lot of the emissions that otherwise would happen. The moment you build a transport system, the moment you decide where your suburbs and your new urban development is going to be, you're locked in for 30 years emission-wise. So planning ahead is going to be the critical challenge to avoid the massive emission increases we would otherwise expect. For Ho Chi Minh, you see here in 2010, what we've calculated is that for 2030, this is what the building area is in Ho Chi Minh, and the energy both from transport and electricity use is related to that. Now this is in 2030, but what we've done is we've worked out how can you make better urban planning decisions so that your spread of the city is less. Here you see it's much more dense. You're making the city more compact, you're combining your transport system with your land planning, you're making sure that where new industries build, that the people who work there are closely located rather than that you make people travel more. And that we have done for 3 cities so far, and the results are astonishing. CO2 from transport, from Ahmedabad, can be reduced by 38%, PM by 60%. For electricity, it's 61%, and for PM, 45%. And as you can see, for the other 2 cities, we have similar impressive results. What it shows, it's possible. We can do this. We just need the will, and we need the planning, and we need to work in partnership with the various stakeholders to make this happen. But I'm very hopeful for Asia. I do see a change in the political will. I do see a lot of people here who I recognize, who I know are doing really fantastic work. It's really now to bring that to the attention. What do we want? Clean air in Asia, both air pollution, greenhouse gas emissions. Because linked with growing city, healthy cities is better air quality and livable cities, and that's what we're all after. So with that, I wish you a very successful conference, and of course we hope that many new partnerships and ideas will grow from this, and we look very much forward to working with you over the next years. Thank you very much.